Welcome back, Defenders. Ukraine struck another refinery. Thick smoke rises over Nizhnekamsk as one of Russia's key petrochemical war-linked plants burns. Here's the video showing the refinery on fire, and this looks like a successful drone attack to me. This occurred deep inside Russia in the Republic of Tatarstan, and when we go to the war map, Ukraine has never struck this refinery before. This was the first time. This refinery produces 8.3 million tons of petrol products per year, and it's more than 1,100 kilometers from the border. If Ukraine can strike this refinery, and they can strike this refinery 1,300 kilometers from the border, then something tells me Ukrainian drones eventually will visit the Perm refinery. Maybe next week. Let's follow up on the strike on the Orsk refinery from 3 days ago. We got additional video and it all looks pretty bad. And we did get confirmation from the Russians that they have halted crude oil processing at the Orsk refinery. They're saying it's for equipment maintenance, but the refinery's on fire. That's probably the real reason. So here are the results. This is what we're fighting for currently. Russia's oil and fuel export revenues continue to slide in October, according to the IEA. Russia's revenues from crude oil and refined products fell again in October due to lower export volumes and weaker prices. The Paris-based IEA said Russia's revenues from crude and fuel exports fell to $13 billion in October, down $2.3 billion from the same point a year ago. So yes, the price is going down, but they're exporting less. They're exporting less because Ukraine keeps applying their own kinetic sanctions. These kinetic sanctions have cost the Russians year over year about $2.3 billion. That's pretty devastating. Here's an interesting chart, and this shows the budget surplus/deficit cumulative total in billions of rubles. And this is the zero line. This is what you need to focus on. So this is actually fascinating if we go back to COVID. This is the orange line in 2020. It makes sense that governments were running deficits in 2020 due to the global pandemic. And you can see that in 2021, Russia recovered. They were running surpluses every month going into December. Now, there's something weird about December where I'm guessing the Russian government spends an additional amount of money because it's the end of the calendar year. So as long as the drop is consistent year to year, you don't have to pay attention to that. But the rest of the years are fascinating. We can start with 2022. This is the black. Russia was running a surplus just as their full-scale invasion began. It then went into a deficit at the end of the year. We can then go into 2023. This is the green. This is when sanctions were biting the Russians and they were being forced to build up their own shadow fleet tankers. Russia was running deficits every month in 2023, but then things improved in 2024. Russia's shadow fleet tankers were doing their job and Russia was still getting a decent price for their oil, but you could see towards the end of 2024, they're still running massive monthly deficits. We then get to 2025, and there's no comparison. 2025 this year is the red line, and these are horrendous year-over-year monthly deficits. Russia is going bankrupt. At the end of the year, the final hole in the Russian budget is planned to be 5.7 trillion rubles, or about 70 billion US dollars, equaling 2.6 of Russia's GDP. Now, the debt situation in Russia is deceptive because Putin doesn't want government debt. He's been trying to avoid this for 25 years. So what Putin does is he forces corporations to take on corporate debt and for his oligarchs to take on private debt. That way it doesn't reflect poorly on him, but he's still the one commanding all of these people, commanding all these industries, and moving the money around. But here's another chart. Here's another way to look at what's currently happening. This red line is the Russian treasury issuing new debt. Putin doesn't want to do this because it makes him look bad. But they have no choice. All of Russia's energy giants and private corporations are operating at losses. And they've all taken on massive debt. All of Russia's companies and industries are going bankrupt just if you look at their books. So the government now is taking on additional debt, and this line just went vertical. The Russian Ministry of Finance sold 1.8 trillion rubles worth of bonds. Tomorrow, 450 billion rubles worth of bonds are due. Net growth and turnover is pretty bad. This is the scenario that needs to play out. Ukraine started striking all these refineries on August 1st. We've now been doing it for almost 4 months. This is working. We just need to keep doing it. Another 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months. It doesn't matter. When money is moved around in large economies, it's kind of sorcery. Like, what gives people confidence in a company or a currency? It's imaginary. It's just faith. Finance Ministry to debut borrowing in Chinese yuan in December. This has been coming, but the Russian government is going to start issuing debt in China's currency, and Putin is going to force Russians who receive payments from China, such as the oil companies, they're going to have to buy these bonds. The Russian government is then going to have the Chinese cash, and they're going to send it back to China to buy stuff. It's just a circle. It's not going to get better. Other bad news for Russia? Ukraine confirms use of Flamingo missiles and strikes on Crimea, Zaporizhia, and targets inside Russia. This is Ukraine's Ministry of Defense. This is their main account. And they put out a video showing the launch of several Flamingo cruise missiles from last night. I can share this. The Flamingo is a ground-launched cruise missile, and it's been in serial production now for several months. The questions we've been asking since September is, where are they? And I think they were working on the guidance system, like they were still producing missiles. They were just tweaking the missiles with tests before they wanted to use them in the real world. But I think this is now it. I think every night Ukraine is going to be launching several of these Flamingo cruise missiles into Russia. They've probably built up a decent stockpile, a reserve. They've trained the crews, and they now have the experience. These missiles are coming for Russian targets every single night going forward. Ukraine strikes power plants in occupied Donetsk, cutting electricity to key Russian-held cities. This is unfortunate because this is Ukrainian territory, but the Russian military has been occupying it for more than a decade. And there is a video showing the strike, could be a Flamingo, on the power plant in Donetsk, knocking out the power to the region. Ukraine also struck the power plant in Oriel again. I think they struck it or some substations a week or two ago. But at the moment, Ukraine is focusing on the power supplies in Bryansk, Kursk, Belgorod, Oriel, and Voronezh. How long can Russia defend them? Eventually, Ukraine is going to knock all these offline. There is a video showing the air defense systems at the power plant going off. So I'm guessing as drones or missiles were coming in, Russia was launching air defense from the thermal power plant. But here's the results. I mean, the building was clearly on fire. There's a hole in the wall, and this is what we have to do. This is what Russia is doing to Ukraine, destroying all their thermal power plants. So Ukraine has to respond. We can't give Russia this unfair advantage. Russia's petrochemical plants producing military polymers engulfed in flames after a Ukrainian strike 300 kilometers from the border. This is where this petrochemical plant is located, and Ukraine struck it like a week or two ago, but they're going to keep hitting it as long as they're producing explosives for the Russian military. The only thing we have is this video showing a fire in the distance at the factory. This is bad news. Russian Su-30 fighter jet crashes near Finland border, both Russian pilots killed. This was confirmed by a Russian Telegram channel. This is Fighter Bomber. He has connections in the Russian Air Force, and I don't understand why. He confirms whenever there's an accident and Russian pilots get killed. But this Su-30 went down near the Finnish border, and the lives of the pilots were lost. And this just seems to be happening every week. Ukraine didn't shoot it down. Possibly this was sabotage, but more than likely it was either operator error or a mechanical malfunction. And every week, there's a helicopter or a Russian jet just falling out of the sky, killing their pilots. Pretty devastating. I'm also kind of thinking, what is going to happen to Russia's civil infrastructure this winter? When the power in a region is knocked out, water is no longer flowing, water is no longer being heated, and if pipes freeze in a cold place like Russia, they tend to explode and burst. So this is in the port city on the Black Sea, Novorossiysk, and a water main erupted. And this video is crazy. Look how big this fountain is. And you can see the residents of the town, they're just driving through the new river forming, pretending like everything's normal. But if this is a cold winter in Russia, and they have power outages due to strikes on thermal power plants, then there's going to be a lot of pipes bursting, a lot of heating systems critically failing. Russia has been putting in the bare minimum to maintain their old Soviet systems for power and HVAC, but it's going to be pushed to the limits this winter. This is a developing story that I think is going to negatively impact the Russian war machine. Moscow cuts the signal. First Russian region faces indefinite mobile internet shutdown. Authorities in the Ulanovsk region say mobile internet will remain shut down until the end of the war. Access is limited to a government-approved whitelist of Russian services. Regional Minister of Digital Development said that the decision had been made at the federal government and that local officials cannot influence it, calling the move a measure to ensure state security. The restrictions will be lifted only by the decision of Moscow. This was told to reporters, emphasizing that the ban applies not only to this region, but to other regions near strategic facilities. Russia can say they're doing this because Ukrainians are using Russian SIM cards and their attack drones, but this is also just about control. They don't want Russians accessing information from the outside world to know and understand how bad life in Russia is. So they're preparing to shut off mobile internet on your cell phone or tablet. I'm guessing if you have a landline, like an Ethernet cable, you can still access the internet through a laptop or computer. But Wi-Fi or public internet on your phone is going to be shut down. The government is putting out propaganda such as this. When Wi-Fi is working, but life is on pause, you're just sitting on your couch scrolling and you're miserable. But when the government shuts your Wi-Fi off, you're alive, you're free, you're able to go out into the real world with your cat and enjoy life. Russians aren't buying it. Residents of Volgograd have filed their first lawsuit in Russia over the mobile internet outages. 44-year-old Maxim K and a relative have filed a lawsuit demanding that Beeline restore their connection and pay them 50,000 rubles in compensation. Nope. Putin has the final say. Russia is a dictatorship, and right now the dictator wants to control absolutely everyone because he's concerned the situation is getting out of hand. This is a chart showing network outage in St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg has a population of 5.6 million people, and they had their mobile internet shut off. Residents across the city are reporting that websites, messaging apps, banking services, delivery platforms, and taxis aren't working. The only service that still functions is the Federal State Information System, the unified portal for all state services. Meaning, Russia wants everyone to use the internet through the official government app. This is called Max. And once you install Max on your phone, the Russian government can access your microphone, they can access your camera, they're recording all of your data and everything you say and do on the app. It's just, as a Russian said, it's a digital concentration camp. This is for the entire population of Russia. All thoughts will be controlled, All messaging will be monitored, and any enemies to the Putin regime will be dealt with. And how are they going to convince Russians to sign up for this Max app on their phone? They're now requiring you to show your verification of your age to buy alcohol with your government app. If you don't install the surveillance equipment on your phone, you can't buy alcohol in Russia now. Sophie's choice right there, isn't it, guys? After expanding online control, lawmaker insists Russia will stay connected to the global web. They're lying. You can only use the internet if you go through the official government app and portal, so that the government can monitor everything you do. This really does have Russians freaked out. Despite how bad the war is going for Russia and Ukraine, the average Russian can ignore it. Just don't watch TV, don't talk to anyone about it, go about your daily life, and you probably can still lead a normal life in Russia not thinking about the war. But now that they're taking away people's internet, this has people in Russia concerned. So here is the latest polling from the Levada Center. If a member of your family or someone close to you signed a contract to participate in the special operation, would you approve or disapprove of that decision? Going back to May of 2023, Russians responding 52% would approve of a relative going to fight and die in Ukraine. By April 2024, it's down to 40%, or 47%. By October of 2024, now it's down to 40%. And today, the most recent polling, only 30% of Russians support a loved one signing a contract to go to Ukraine and fight. They know it's a death sentence. Public opinion polling in Russia is dangerous because the regime is looking for people who would respond no, and then they're going to talk to those people or maybe even find them. So I think this number is actually lower than 30, but this is the data we have. This next story is going to be very challenging for me to talk about, but I can't imagine what it feels like for any Ukrainians who watch my video. I know you are outraged. I know you are upset. You have every right to be. You should be upset. So let me give you the basics of what's happening, and then I'll express my thoughts and opinions. Ukraine hit by mega corruption scandal, 7 suspects, 2 fugitives, ministers under fire. Operation Midas may become a serious trial for the Ukrainian political elites as corruption contours reminiscent of a decade ago are reappearing in the eyes of society. Okay. Suspects in a large-scale energy corruption case have allegedly manipulated senior officials as part of an extensive influence peddling network. Prosecutors presented evidence in courts yesterday. The hearings were held after the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, this is NABU, charged 8 suspects with bribery, abuse of office, and illicit enrichment in a large-scale corruption case involving the state nuclear power company Energodom. The alleged ringleader is Timur Mindich, a close associate of President Zelensky and a co-owner of the president's Kvartal 95 production company. What happened was, this is the state nuclear power company, and there are government funds going to the Minister of Education, and contracts are signed for certain things to be done. One of the most common forms of corruption in really anywhere in the world, but especially in the old Soviet system, is you allocate money to a company to do something, and the company just never does it. In this instance, money was allocated for defense structures to be built at energy sites, and those structures were never built. The money was just pocketed. In addition, there are kickbacks. Whoever is chosen for a contract, they then under the table have to pay money to the guy or the committee that made the decision. And this has probably been going on for 4 years, probably since Zelensky took office in 2019. Ukraine's Energodom exec detained for $100 million embezzlement, enough for 40,000 interceptor drones as a country sits in darkness. These individuals had $360,000 in luxury apartments and 3 Mercedes. This is Zelensky's friend, who is the ringleader of this operation. And here's my opinion. Ukraine is currently in a state of war. They're under martial law. If anyone was stealing taxpayer dollars to enrich themselves during a time of war, then take these people out in front of a brick wall and shoot them. They're traitors. If you are embezzling millions of dollars that should have been going towards defense or whatever, then you're killing people. You're killing soldiers on the front lines. You're killing civilians who don't have heat, running water, and electricity. So this man is a traitor. I don't care how long he's been friends with President Zelensky. He used his position of power to enrich himself and his friends. And he's currently on the run. He fled the country. He's probably in Switzerland, Austria, or Israel by now, and he needs to be found. He needs to be brought back to Ukraine. He needs to be put in front of a military judge. Because Ukraine is under martial law, civilian courts don't need to be used. We're not going to let him use his stolen money to hire fancy lawyers to defend himself. Put the evidence in front of a military judge, and then put this guy in front of a brick wall and shoot him. He's a traitor. That's how I feel, guys. The real concern here is, what about Zelensky? Zelensky demands ministers' resignations as energy corruption scandal deepens. Zelensky called for the resignations of the justice minister and the energy minister amid a major energy corruption scandal. A president at war cannot have friends. Zelensky says he cut ties with ex-business partner as graft scandal deepens. When did Zelensky know that his friend was stealing money? Did this have anything to do with Nabu being shut down by Zelensky and his party a couple months ago? There were a lot of ministers resigning and being forced to change back in June and July. So yes, I do believe that Zelensky knew at some point this investigation was going on and that it involved some of his friends, and he just sat on it. He just waited. Probably waited for the investigation to go through the process and then present the evidence in court. But he could have arrested this guy. He could have taken away his passport. He could have seized his bank account before he fled the country with all this money. So that doesn't look good. Here is Zelensky speaking for himself. There must be maximum integrity in the energy sector in absolutely all processes. I support, and the Prime Minister supports, every investigation carried out by law enforcement and anti-corruption officials. This is an absolutely clear and consistent position for everyone. Right now, it is extremely difficult for everyone in Ukraine, enduring power outages, Russian strikes, and losses. It is absolutely unacceptable that, amid all this, there are also some schemes in the energy sector. I will sign a decree to impose sanctions on 2 individuals implicated in the Nabu case concerning the energy company. Right now, we all must protect Ukraine. Undermining the state means you will be held accountable. Breaking the law means you will be held accountable. I want to thank everyone who stands with Ukraine. Thank you all who defend our state. Zelensky slaps sanctions on Mindich and Zuckerman after a $100 million corruption scandal. Seize their houses, seize their cars, seize their bank accounts. If they fled to Israel or Austria or Switzerland or whatever, get their extradition. Bring them back to Ukraine, put them against a brick wall, and shoot them. They're traitors in a time of war. Concerning Zelensky, I don't think he's corrupt. Does he have corrupt friends? Yes. Did he know that maybe his corrupt friends were engaging in corruption? Possibly, but it doesn't make any sense. If Zelensky himself was corrupt, then he had 3 years between 2019 and 2022 to steal money for himself, and as soon as Russia invaded, he would have taken Biden's helicopter ride out of the country. Why would he put himself through this if his only motivation in life was to enrich himself and steal money? Doesn't make any sense. All of the war crimes he has witnessed, the bombed schools that he's been to, all of the maimed and wounded soldiers in the hospital he visits. He's an actor, but he's not that good of an actor. So obviously he's a patriot. This guy works all day, every day, making phone calls, meeting with world leaders, getting the support and weapons that Ukraine needs to stay in the fight. But if his only motivation was corruption, he would have fled the country with his money. This is what Bashar al-Assad did in Syria. Bashar al-Assad, when his military was collapsing, he loaded up a private plane full of bricks of cash, and he fled to Moscow. And he's currently living in a luxury high-rise apartment playing Xbox all day. The former dictator of Syria is just playing Xbox all day, Call of Duty. Zelensky didn't do that. So I don't believe he himself was engaging in corruption, but given the legacy inside Ukraine and the former Soviet republics of Russian corruption, this is part of the fight. Ukraine was corrupt in the 90s, it was corrupt in the 2000s, it was corrupt in the 2010s. Russia invading them didn't change that. And I think when you're the president, you compromise on things and you pick and choose your battles. But yeah, I think this is going to adversely affect his legacy and his perception and standing in the world. And I know Ukrainians are upset. I want to read a little bit of this thread from Maria. She is an ex-diplomat at Ukraine's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and an ex-employee at the Ministry of Defense. This is an effing disgrace. As an ex-public servant, to see the news this week about the enrichment and corruption which was uncovered within the government I served has been a deeply shocking experience which left me very sad and ashamed. I don't want my country, my people, and my future children to be trapped in a system which allows these things to happen. It has reminded me of the revolution of dignity at Maidan was against that system of enrichment and corruption, and how we must still defeat it, even as we also battle for our very lives against the Russians who would murder and enslave us. My grandmother is in Kyiv without electricity for 12 to 16 hours a day, and it turns out it's not just because the Russians are effing bastards. It's also because the president's close friend and business partner, the Minister of Energy, and a F-ton of other people in the government were stealing money meant for protective structures, structures they didn't even build. She goes on, and she has every right to be horrified. This is terrible, guys. This is going to affect morale of the people and the soldiers on the front lines, and it's going to affect how the Allies perceive Ukraine. The FBI and the EU are parts of the anti-corruption efforts. I think Western anti-corruption agents are trying to assist Ukraine in this investigation to protect these people, trying to expose what's going on. That's a good thing. Germany won't cut Ukraine aid over corruption case, but will watch very closely, says a spokesperson. At the moment, no allies have said we're going to stop providing aid to Ukraine over this corruption case, but I know in the comments section, Russian trolls and Russian bots are now going to be able to reference this to try and promote Russia and tarnish Ukraine's reputation. We're going to get more information, and I'll cover it in my future videos. Let's now get to the good news for Ukraine. U.S. imposes sanctions on 32 entities in 8 countries for aiding Iran's missile and drone programs. I view this as good news for Ukraine because the United States is now applying more sanctions on other countries. Sanctions on Venezuela, sanctions now on countries helping Iran's military programs. Iran is still an ally of Russia, but if we can get Trump and the Treasury Department comfortable with applying more sanctions on other countries, eventually they'll get around to sanctioning Russia again, which we want. Canada imposes new sanctions on Russian drone and energy production. Thank you so much to Canada. Denmark commits 188 million euros through the Danish model to strengthen Ukraine's hand both militarily and diplomatically. Thank you so much to the fantastic Danish. You guys are incredible. Nordics and the Baltics pledge 500 million arms package for Ukraine under the NATO-led Pearl initiative. So thank you so much to Denmark, Estonia, Finland, Iceland, Latvia, Lithuania, Norway, and Sweden for chipping in. Okay. For the final video, we'll have fun. I can't play the sound because it's the Rocky music, like da-da-da, da-da-da. And this is supposed to be an advanced AI robot being unveiled at a tech show in Russia. But because it's Russia, this is how the robot went. Can't play the music, but I'll just narrate what's going on here. You've got a robot stepping out there in personal home assistants. Maybe they're the thing of the future and everyone's going to want to buy these. So Russia's trying to get into this space. And how's it going? Oh, it's fallen over and it's lost its back panel. Let's see if we can get this Russian robot back on his feet. Nope, not going to work. Get that tarp out there. I watched this clip and I have to wonder, why did they have this tarp prepared? Like, how did they know that they would need this? Unless they were just anticipating that this stupid robot was going to fall over as soon as it went on stage. This isn't the first time there's been a robot controversy in Russia. This is an incredible clip, but this was a couple years ago. They unveiled another futuristic robot, except it wasn't a robot. It was a guy in a suit.
Russian state TV is defending a broadcast that appeared to suggest a robot at a tech forum was real. A reporter said during the broadcast the hope was more youth would get involved in robotics after seeing the state-of-the-art robot. On social media, people raised questions about the dancing robot, including why it had no sensors and how it was made so quickly. A photo of the robot also appeared to show a human neck and hair peeking out from the helmet. Through research by journalists and members of the public, the robot was revealed to be a man in a costume. The forum organizers said they had never claimed the robot was real. 2 days after the broadcast, the TV station said it knew all along a man was inside the quote-unquote robot. And the reporter, who had given the impression the robot was real, says he thought most people would assume it was really just an actor in a costume. According to the costume's maker, the product gives a quote,
Russia just isn't a serious place. But check out the butt on that robot, guys. All right, we need to stop this video. Okay, that's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.